welcome to the Appeon 2016 product suite and the debugger configuration and execution tutorial. This is for Appeon web-based applications. In this tutorial, we're going to be running on the Microsoft Windows version 10 64-bit operating system. We'll utilize an existing PowerBuilder 12.6 application as an example. Deployment for the PowerBuilder application is to a .NET-based Appeon server in 64-bit mode. It should be noted that you can also run the debugging sessions in a J2EE or Java-based 64-bit or 32-bit Appeon server as well. We'll be utilizing the Appeon developer's configuration tool to set the debugging parameters. This is a very simple PowerBuilder application, no Windows API calls, no OLE object service calls, no web service calls. We're utilizing an SQL Anywhere 64-bit DBMS. The connectivity between the Appeon server and the DBMS is provided through ODBC. Now, we're also utilizing a local deployment model, also called the Appeon developer version, where Appeon server, Appeon developer, PowerBuilder, and the database engine are all installed on the same PC. The debugger benefits are as follows. You can actually debug a running Appeon web-based application in the Internet Explorer browser. It should be noted that it only works with IE. The debugger is not available in the other web browsers like Firefox, Chrome, Opera, for example, that will run your application, but not a debugging session. You must use Internet Explorer. There's a low learning curve for the Appeon debugger because it looks and feels just like the PowerBuilder debugger. So it means if you know how to use it in PowerBuilder, you already know how to use the Appeon debugger. Because the Appeon web application is built from generating JavaScript code from your PowerScript code, the Appeon debugger seamlessly maps the PowerScript world to the JavaScript world. In other words, the PowerBuilder developer will set breakpoints in what looks like PowerScript code, but the Appeon debugger will automatically transpose that to the JavaScript code working in the Internet Explorer browser. It's going to be easy to launch the Appeon debugger because inside the PowerBuilder IDE there is an Appeon developer toolbar, and there's a link to the Appeon debugger from there. You can review and change variables. You can view and change object properties, watch points, just like the PowerBuilder debugger. And for a truly interactive experience, you can also revise and set breakpoints on the fly while you're in a debugging session, just like the PowerBuilder IDE debugger. So what do we have to do to get ready for a debugging session? One of the first things is to actually install a Microsoft Script Debugger helper, and you can see the link to download that. Once that's done, then we need to install it. So moving over here to my File Explorer in Windows, you can see I've already downloaded that particular file. I need to extract the contents of that, which is basically going to be like a setup.exe for the Microsoft Script Debugger, and double-click the executable to run it. Well, you accept the license agreement. Here's the default location. You can leave that the same. And there you are. The Script Debugger has now been installed. So the next thing we need to do is we need to enable script debugging in the Microsoft Internet Explorer web browser. So if I bring up the browser at this point, I was to select Tools, then Internet Options. Proceed over here to the Advanced tab and scroll down a little bit. You'll probably see that the install for this was Disable Script Debugging. What we need to do is we need to enable it by removing the check mark and hitting Apply. Once that's down, hit OK, and you can actually put the Internet Explorer browser away. So now the Microsoft Script Debugger is there, and debugging is allowed in the Internet Explorer web browser. So now what we need to do is actually pick up a PowerBuilder application and get it ready for debugging using the Appeon debugger. So let's return to the PowerBuilder environment for that and have a look at the configuration tool. You can see here that the word search application that you see here on the left-hand side in the system tree is already defined. It is a PowerBuilder 12.6 application, and it will run. So for example, we can actually, let's run it actually using the debugger here in PowerBuilder. You can see here that there's an open of a frame window. Double-clicking this sets a breakpoint. If we have a look at the windows, we can see here that there is a frame window that gets opened, and it has a post-open event, which is actually going to connect to the database. You'll notice here that I've purposely put an error in here. It's actually trying to connect using an invalid password, SQL Z or Z, as opposed to just SQL. So if we were to actually run this, now that I have some breakpoints, that we're going to find a problem. So let's also put a breakpoint here on the connect, and then we'll execute the debugger and the application. You can see here we're getting ready to open the frame. I'll just continue on. And here we are right at the connect. And this is actually going to fail because the DB parm has the wrong password. So if we went to global variables, look at the SQL communications area, we can see here that if you double click it, that there is an invalid password. So if I change that, of course, it's going to work. So we're actually going to step through the code and run the connect. And then it's going to come back and check the return code. In this case, the message box is bypassed because the return code was 0. And it just continues on. And there we go. So I'm not going to do too much here. I'm just going to show you that this is a simple little word program, a word search program. It allows you to actually build words and then fill in all around these words with random characters, and then print this out so that you can actually give it to your friends and they can find the hidden words, for example, like PowerBuilder or Appeon. So this is a native Windows application. All right, so returning back to the configuration tool, we should be able to debug this in the web browser as well. There's only one thing that we need to do here is change a parameter, which is release. I need to change that to debug. So you notice here you have a choice, debug just the JavaScript or debug the PowerScript JavaScript combination, which is my standard that I like to choose, and hit OK. Once you do that, then we need to go in and redeploy the application. So all that debugging information gets deployed to the Appeon server. You notice as soon as you change the status from release to PowerBuilder debug JavaScript PowerScript, it automatically defaults to a full application deployment. If this is not chosen, make sure you set full application deployment and select next. You'll see here that the application now will get redeployed with all the cross-reference debugging information. This will only take a few seconds. And there we go. No errors, no warnings, and we're ready to go. So you have a choice at this point. You can actually run the debug session here by choosing Configure. This is new for Appeon 2016. This was not available in Appeon 2015. And select Configure, change this to debug, and then hit Run. Once you do that, the Appeon debug target will come up. In this case, the word search application. We'll hit OK. Entering the Appeon debugger, we can see it's very much the same as the PowerBuilder debugger. So remember in debugging our native application, I had a breakpoint on the open of the application object that opens the MDI frame window. So I'll double click here to create a breakpoint. Also on the frame window itself, on the post open, I'll double click here just to see the source code. And I'll put a breakpoint by double clicking on the connect, because we know this password SQL Z or Z is not going to be accepted by the SQL Anywhere DBMS. Once we've set the same breakpoints, and we can confirm that in the bottom right hand side under breakpoint pane, as you can see here, the application is starting and we're at the open of the frame. So now I can step into the code, step over the code, step out of this particular code if I'm calling inside of a function, set the next statement to execute, and then run to that particular statement. In this case, I'm just going to continue on. Now the next breakpoint comes up, and you can see here we're just about to do the connect to the database. So if I go to my global variables SQL transaction area, the database return code is -1, but the connect hasn't been done. If we scroll down a little bit, we can see here that the password is incorrect. And if I double click that and scroll over to the end, I'll be able to actually fix the password by removing the Z or Z from the actual DB parm string. I'll hit OK. We've changed the variables. Now we'll actually then step over the connect command, and we can have a look at the return code. The return code is 0. So if I step again, I would, as I'd expect, bypass the message box because everything's okay. Now I'll just continue on at this point. And we're back into the application. Database connection is okay. I can bring up my template. I can fill up the random characters, and then I can print this out so that people can find, for example, the hidden word Power Builder or the hidden word Appeon inside this particular word search puzzle. Exactly like the native application. Everything's working fine now. I know the problem, which is the database connection. So I'm just going to exit the application and we'll close the browser. And you can see we're back here to the actual Appeon Debugger control panel. So you have a choice at this point to actually stop debugging. If you didn't close the Internet Explorer browser, but you return to the debugger, you can actually shut it down this way, or you can shut down the Internet Explorer application, and it comes back to the debugger with this disabled. Just like Power Builder, I would recommend that you make sure you stop debugging if it is active, and then close the browser. And now you return back to the Power Builder IDE. So as you can see here, after performing a full deployment of the Power Builder application, we were able to actually run the Appeon web debugger and interact with the debugger and debug the application running in the Microsoft web browser exactly like we would with the Power Builder debugger. So congratulations, you've now successfully installed, configured, and utilized the Appeon web debugger. Thanks for watching.